Welcome all to another episode of the 7 Minute Business Club. I'm Brian Briscoe. You guys probably know that by now. You're sick of my face. A face you won't be sick of because you won't have seen it in Australia in a while is Rasmus Ankersen. Virtually welcome back to Australia, Rasmus.
Thank you very much.
You were here, I think you were here 2012, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was there when my book, The Goldmine Effect, was published. I was doing a little bit of a book tour, and I was lucky to get a chance to thank you very much to speak at EO. So that was my first time in Perth. Really enjoyed that, and hope to come back one day.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We got to find a way to get Brentford or get it. Excuse my pronunciation. How do you pronounce the Danish club that you're also involved in?
It's known to be the club with a name no one can pronounce. So don't feel bad about that. It's called FC Midtjylland.
Midtjylland, okay. Well, we'll find a reason for one of those guys to play Perth Glory in the future, and we can have you back here and have a glass of wine with you and see you in person again. Raz, as I said to you, you presented here, and I was at your presentation 8 years ago, and I was taken by some of the concepts that the Goldmine Effect covered, which essentially, and hopefully I described this in an eloquent manner. You had gone to a number of what we would call high performance centers of sport. So whether they be in athletics, golf, or anything else, and started to look at some of the traits that were common to those areas that were producing so many high performance athletes relative to other parts of the world who were trying to do the same thing and failing. So you had South Korean golfers, you had part of Brazil that was producing fantastic footballers, and you had the famous athletics club that Usain Bolt and others have popped out of. Is that a fair representation of the Goldmine Effect?
Yeah, no, I got really interested in why a lot of high performers tend to come out of the same small places, and I thought rather than doing the research back from a desk, maybe I should just go around the world, go into these environments, live and train with these guys to try and feel on my own body what this was like. So I actually wasn't going into this with the purpose of writing a book. It was more like just out of curiosity, and then along the journey I realized, well, there might be a book to be written about this. So I came back and I did that. So yeah, it's a concept I've been very interested in, like this cluster effect.
Yeah, great. And then you've written a book, Hungry in Paradise, since, which was released around about 4 years ago, which perhaps, to be too simplistic about it, spoke about complacency and almost the Nokia effect. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's like I think when organizations become successful, they don't just fight their competitors. To a large extent, they fight themselves. And I was interested in approaching this concept of why successful organizations so often hesitate to fail before it's too late. I was approaching that from a psychological, cultural point of view, to say what changes. What you almost kind of fight your human nature. So how do you keep complacency out of the building? How do you change from a position of strength? It's more difficult psychologically to drive people to change when things are going well than when they're not going well. So I think it's, in many ways, it's a lot more difficult to lead a successful organization than a failing one. And the Hunger in Paradise was an attempt to address that.
Yeah, great. I watched a TEDx talk where in Manchester, where you carried out the old Nokia 3110, and I'd forgotten how incredibly good a market share they had, right? And how it was just like
Nokia is like the good old example of a company that they had more than 50% global market share, and within 4 years they were down to 3%.
Wow.
And I just think that raised a lot of questions about, like, why is it that successful companies fail, and what could they have done to stay ahead of the pack? So.
Yeah. So you're now based in the UK, and you spend a good bit of your time in Denmark with the two football clubs, Brentford FC being the other football club. And for those non-soccer fans, they're currently in third position in the second tier, which is still an extremely high level inside the context of European soccer. And you're in, you're probably experiencing businesses going through very similar challenges to what we're experiencing here in Australia, New Zealand, and across Asia, right? And that's a real challenge to revenue, a challenge to the ability to do business in the way that you would like to because of social distancing, etc. So just as a broad question first, and maybe one that's going to put you under pressure, but I don't think it will. Knowing what you know regarding the research that you did for these books, and also the fact that you're both an investor and you're a leader in some companies, what are some of the lessons that you took from that you've been applying yourself in the last few weeks in this challenging time?
So I've always been a big believer that innovation is driven by constraints, not by abundance of resource. And people tend to think that, oh, if I just had all the money, all the resources, all the people, all the time, then we could go out and do all these things. But I think there's a lot of evidence that constraints really breeds creativity.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite examples of that is like Southwest Airlines, that became world famous for this 12-minute turnaround. It takes 12 minutes to empty the plane and put new passengers on, and that's kind of been a competitive edge for them, because if you can spend less time on the ground, more time in the air, then you have a better business. And the way they came up with that was because they were almost bankrupt. So they had 4 planes in the fleet. They had to sell one, so they only had three left. And then they asked themselves, can we fly the original schedule with 3 planes instead of 4 planes? And if we got to do that, we need to find a way to turn around that plane faster than everyone else. So the constraint they face kind of forced them to ask themselves a question that would never have emerged. So that's why I think it's just a great example of why there's a lot of opportunity in these situations that we face now. If we can use the constraint. So I had a lot of conversations with my leadership teams at the football clubs about what we could do, and I think we've come up with a lot of good ideas that in 1 or 2 years' time we will sit and think back and say, well, okay, this is one of 2 ideas that actually came from the Corona crisis, and that really moved the needle for us. One concept, to give a specific example, at the Danish football club is we were obviously not allowed to play games, and we were not allowed to play games in front of crowds. So the remaining parts of the season we have to play in behind closed doors. So we were thinking, well, how can we use that constraint to come up with a new concept? And then one of our guys came up with this thing called the first drive-in football experience. So that has kind of led to a concept now, which is covered by media from all over the world. We have Al Jazeera, we have BBC, we have Fox Sports going to fly into Denmark on the 1st of June to cover this, because it's the first ever drive-in football experience ever in the world. And so we will have big screens around the stadium. And because we have, at Midtjylland, there's not a lot of people living there. It's basically in the middle of nowhere. So we have more parking spaces outside the stadium than anyone else in the world. So we kind of said, how can we turn this into a strength now?
Yeah.
And then we came up with this idea. So I think this is a concept I think will obviously given the club a huge amount of PR on a global level, and is maybe something that we will keep doing once a year after this.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So there's a lot of things you can do if you approach it with the right mindset these difficult times.
One of my favorite examples, and I think I read it in a Jim Collins book, was how 3M came up with the Post-it notes. And it was almost kind of by accident, but it was also when they gave their engineers 15% of their time to come up with new ideas. So up until that point, they were just all so busy doing what they were doing, which is probably paper and window tinting, where the Post-it notes have outsold both those products. And it was just this crazy idea that they had in that kind of somewhere between working and having a beer. And they had that little kind of, purgatory where they got to come up with these ideas. Thanks for your time. I know you've been trying to get from Denmark to London for quite a while of the last week.
It's been a bit of an operation, I can tell you.
What we used to take for granted is now a complex challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Hey, thank you very much. Don't forget, guys, I'll put some links to Rasmus's work underneath, including his TED Talks and also his books, because this one is just fantastic. We want to have a quick, easy read, but also really get some great analogies between sport and business. Don't forget 7minclub.com. Look us up on Facebook or LinkedIn. Raz, thanks a lot for your time as always, mate.
See you again, Brian. Thanks very much.